program here in Dublin, our high school programs, and it's a chance for you to ask any questions that you might have or to find out more information about any aspect of our summer high school study abroad programs, which we've run here for a few years. And on the next slide, you'll see a slightly younger me, looking a bit less weather beaten. But my position is I'm the Centre Director in Dublin, Ireland, and I am hosting today's virtual fair for Dublin. I've been with CIE since 2019, so just this is we've done 3 years. 2020 was a bit of a washout, and I've been working in study abroad for almost 20 years, mostly in my hometown, Dublin, Ireland. And we've been running programs here since 2005. We work mostly with university students during the year and in the summers with high school students, and we've been running high school programs here in Dublin since 2016. So thinking about, why people might come here or what makes it different, CIE have a lot of locations around the world, a lot of different programs, and from kind of looking and talking with students, the reasons why they often choose to come to Ireland, well, I've grouped them in 4. The city itself, compared to most US cities, Dublin's it's an old city with very young people. So it was founded more than 1,000 years ago. We celebrated our 1,000th anniversary back in 1988, about 30 years ago now. It was somewhat an arbitrary date. The city's a couple of 100 years older than that. But it's a very young city in terms of its population makeup. So we're the youngest capital city in Europe, with about 50% of the inhabitants being less than 26. We've got several major universities which drive the age down. We've also got a huge amount of tech and social media firms based in Dublin, which brings in a younger work base. And what that means for students is that there are lots of peers, lots of young people for them to interact with. We work with different groups on different programs. Okay. A couple of people have messaged me just to say that they're having some connection issues, and hopefully they'll be able to join in. This is being recorded as well, so it can be shared afterwards if there's something that we missed. The country. So Dublin, it's a city of 1.2 million people. The greater Dublin area is 2.3. It sounds like a pretty small place. It's very dominant within Ireland, where the population is just 5 million. If we were a state, it would be comparable in size to the state of Indiana. So we'd be about the 25th largest state of the union. What that means for students coming here on relatively short programs like summer programs is that in just a few weeks, you have the opportunity to see quite a lot of the diversity of what the country has to offer. So during any of our high school summer programs, we're taking an overnight trip, we're taking a couple of day trips out of the city. But you don't have to go far. You only have to go 8 to 10 miles, sorry for the typo, from the city centre to be up in the Wicklow Mountains in a landscape that people often think is the more typical Irish landscape. Very green, rolling countryside, farms, forests, mountains. And Dublin itself has some beautiful beaches, which nobody expects until they get here. But I defy people to swim in the summertime if they haven't experienced the cold shock of North Atlantic water. Our programs are another attractive aspect for students. A lot of CIE's programs are hosted in destinations where the language is not English. And the purpose of the program is to improve your language skills. Obviously, the first spoken language here in Ireland is English. And what this means for us is that, our students coming in can engage with everybody they meet, from our staff here in Dublin to the people working at the residences, to our guest lecturers, to the people who host our site visits, to people they meet in shops and along the street. So it really allows them to engage with the community. We've been running these high school programs since 2016. We've got 2. One is Global Entrepreneurship, and that was the original program here in Dublin. And the other is our Leadership and Social Justice program, which we ran for the first time in 2021. And both of those programs will run in 2 summer sessions next year. So one starting in about the 10th of June, and the other starting around the end of the first week of July. So we've been fine tuning those programs over the last few years. And we think we have a very slick product at this stage, because we've been working with different companies on the entrepreneurship program and now work with the best companies we've chosen over the years. We've been working with social activists and community organizations over the last couple of years on other programs, and have been able to bring that into the high school program as well, which has been great for us. And then the fourth key factor for attracting people to Ireland, the people. Even in this summer that just went, where COVID restrictions still exist around the globe, and perhaps they'll be there next year as well, but to a smaller degree, our students were able to really get out there and interact, with members of our local community here in Ireland, but also to get to know, people from different parts of the United States who they wouldn't ordinarily meet via the other participants on the program. And there's never that language barrier to worry about when you're coming to Ireland. Why are we thinking? I didn't prepare these slides, so I'm not going to take the blame for the typo. But why you love global entrepreneurship or leadership and social justice? So, as I said, we run two different programs within the Global Navigator umbrella. One of them is a business-oriented program, Global Entrepreneurship. The other one is a more socially oriented program, Leadership and Social Justice. But they have a lot of commonalities. Both programs are small groups of students. We tend to have between 15 and a maximum of 20 students. Regardless of the program size, if it's more than 15, we're looking at 2 instructors. We have 10-to-1 as the ratio between program leaders and students. And then our Dublin staff is in additional to that. We like to include a lot of hands-on activities. So on a typical kind of Monday to Friday weekday, you'd be taking a class in the morning and then going on a co-curricular or co-curricular site visit or a cultural site visit in the afternoon. So the idea is that the lesson plans, they're coordinated with the excursions and the activities to build on what you've learned in class. So you'll be exposed to something in the classroom and then you'll go out and see it in practice. Or you'll be discussing for example, like in a business, for example, or you'll be discussing a particular facet of leadership or a particular social justice issue that's present here in Dublin. And then the afternoon site visit will be to an organization working in that field. For example, it could be the Irish Travellers, a very underrepresented and socially disadvantaged group here in Ireland. And then in the afternoon, visiting Pavy Point, meeting some Irish Travellers themselves, and Pavy Point is their lobbying body or promotional body for the traveller movement here. Our programs, they're all housed in a student residence called Highlight Student Living, which is right in the city centre on Thomas Street. And regardless of the program you're on, the housing is basically the same. It's single ensuite housing in shared apartment clusters. And this tends to be really popular with students because on other programs, quite often you've got a roommate, or you might be staying in a hotel and it's a little bit anonymous, or you might be staying with a host family, and our host families are great where we use them. We don't use them in Dublin. So it means that in the evenings, you're with other students on the program and you have that social interaction the whole time. So the way the housing is structured is it's generally 8 rooms, which are en suite with their own bathrooms, their own storage space, their own lockable door, and they share a common kitchen and living space with, TV and sofas and things like that. One of our program leaders lives in each cluster, so there will be 7 students and a program leader living there on site. And then the highlight itself has its own larger communal features, foosball tables, pool tables, big screens, cinema screens that are shared by the whole building. Okay, and with the way we organize our programs is we've got global entrepreneurship students in Block A, we've got social leadership and social justice students in Block B, but they're mixing together, if the COVID situation allows. It was a bit more limited this year, at least in the first 5 days. And so these are all photos from our 2020 Global Navigator high school programs. The first photo there is actually taken in the student residence. It was a novelty mug designing activity that students were doing to create their own memento when they were leaving. Beneath that then, we've got students collaborating on, I think, just looking at the faces, that's the Global Entrepreneurship Program. So there they were working together to, following a system of steps to launch a startup and to promote it to a panel of seed investors. So that's the group working together. The bottom right is a social activity. Students are out trying their hands at the traditional Irish game of hurling, which is the world's fastest field game, despite what lacrosse players say. It's a great leveler for students because everybody's starting from the same page. Nobody's played it or experienced it before. And it's a great chance to interact with local students and local participants as well. And just up in the top right is a group meal. This was summer 2020, summer 2021. So because of COVID at the time, everything in Ireland was dining outside. So we made those arrangements for students. So on a day-by-day basis, on the Monday to Friday, as I said, will be generally a class in the morning, a social or co-curricular activity in the afternoon, and a social activity in the evening. Sorry, a cultural or co-curricular activity in the afternoon, social activity in the evening. The weekends then there are either the overnight trip or the day trips to somewhere further afield than Dublin. But the kind of places that we visit, you'll get to visit historical and cultural sites and treasures. And Dublin has some outstanding museums. You'll have the opportunity to ring the city bells from the top of Christchurch Cathedral, which was built in 1069, so coming up for its 1000th anniversary. You're interacting with guest speakers and local representatives. So we work then, as I said, on the entrepreneurship program. You're meeting local players from the startup scene. This year, the theme was food and beverage. So we were, meeting people who'd started their own restaurants, who'd started their own takeout services, people who'd reacted to the pandemic by creating new businesses. And then in social leadership and social justice, we were working with guys like Gary Gannon, who's a former, he was homeless 20 years ago. He's ended up starring in Hollywood movies since then, and is a local activist for the homeless situation here in Dublin. With Terry, who leads us on kind of true areas of Dublin the students just wouldn't visit otherwise, because uniquely Dublin has some very kind of socially deprived areas quite close to the centre, whereas generally they're kind of much further afield. We like to run activities on the rooftop. The rooftop space at our residence is great. Evening light, because this is a summer programme, it's 8 o'clock where I am, so it will be dark generally. It's been dark since 4 because this is Dublin in winter. But in the summertime, then it's bright until 10:30 or so. So you're able to kind of continue to have fun, interesting activities out of doors right until late in the evening. Just this weekend, I visited a site our students visited last summer, Glendalough, so about an hour outside Dublin. It's a 6th century monastery up in the Wicklow Mountains. I've mentioned the mysterious bog diving because this was one I wasn't familiar with myself, but on a site visit last summer to Causey Farm, where students, learn to bake traditional Irish soda bread. They learn some sustainable farming practices and even some Irish dancing. What intrigued students the most was the opportunity to put on, sweats and stuff like that and jump into this horrible muddy bog. Apparently it was great fun. It definitely wouldn't be for me. As I mentioned, that bottom right-hand photo is students partaking in traditional Irish Gaelic games, which is always a popular activity with our students here in Dublin. Okay, it's a lot of me talking. So I'm going to flick on to the next slide and just, talk very briefly about housing before I give you an opportunity then to ask any questions that you might have about anything to do with our operations here in Dublin or our programs. So, you live in group housing. As I said, it's 8 people sharing a common space, but you do have your own space to withdraw, shall we say. So this is a room from the residence we use. the beds they're not huge. They're larger than a single bed, smaller than a double bed. There's plenty of storage underneath them. And there's also a study space, obviously, wardrobes, and then you've got an ensuite bathroom. Everything that you need to live on the program is included in your program fee. So in Dublin, how that stacks up is that breakfast is at the apartments, so in your shared kitchens. We keep them stocked with a wide selection of fresh foods. We take on students' feedback about what they want and what they don't want, because every group tends to be different. Every student is different. We can cater for any dietary requirements that people may have. The other meals, lunch and dinner, then are a mix. They are catered in quite often. So restaurants delivering, food to the student residents. We visit local restaurants as part of the program for lunches or for dinners. And then sometimes there are stipend meals where students are given a certain amount of money and they can choose their own. So what we do actually on Thursdays generally is we go to, like, say, for example, Merrion Square Food Market. Students are given, about 10 euros, about $13 to select their own lunch from, 30 or 40 kind of artisan pop-ups and food trucks and stuff that are there. And then we kind of sit down and chill and eat in the middle of the beautiful park. And then on site in the evenings, we basically have a kind of a two-tier curfew. If we're not outside running our own activity, if there's not an event on, students are back at the residence by 9. That doesn't mean they're back in their rooms at 9. It just means they're back in the residence structure. They're still hanging out with people from outside the group. Then from 10, you're back in your own apartment cluster, and then from 11, it's lights out. So I'd like to turn it over to you all. I don't know if people have traveled abroad before, if this might be the first time, if people have been to Ireland before, it might be the first time in Europe, or if people are comfortable turning on their mics and their cameras to ask questions, or would rather pop questions into the chat box. I'm happy to answer on anything, any topic. Nobody ever wants to be the first person to ask a question. I can understand that from being a person myself. So when I'll start myself by answering my own question. But perfect, you got one coming in. Yeah, no, absolutely. If there are parents on the call, I'm there's usually as many parents as students. I just can't see anybody, so I don't know. So if you have questions, I'd be delighted to answer them. I know from previous experience, students are usually more interested in what they're going to be doing. Parents are more interested in what we're doing to make sure that their kids are safe. Yeah, so good question. If students bring personal cell phones, on the Dublin program, we give students cell phones here in Ireland with Irish SIM cards and Irish phone numbers in them. So, we have a bag of smartphones that we supply to students. We then create, it means that students will always have data, will always be contactable. There's no risk that their international cell plan doesn't work. There's no risk that they are reliant on Wi-Fi and we can't contact them. So it enables us to be able to keep in touch with everybody, to keep everybody informed. Most students then do bring their own cell phones with them from the US if they have one. But they can share the cell phone numbers that we give them with anyone at home. And we encourage them just to carry our phones because cell phones are expensive and they're targets. And we would rather somebody lost one of our phones than lost their own phone. It is very useful for students to have their own cell phone with a data plan just for the travel day. You know, a lot of students, we offer, you know, a chaperone flight, and CIE sends flight information to students in February and says, okay, you know, you can book your own flight, or if you book onto this flight, or these two flights, which will originate in East Coast hubs, well, we'll guarantee that there's a CIE person traveling on that flight. You know, so one of the program leaders will be there. But, you know, with the best will in the world, this year was flawless, actually. But in 2019, there were large storms on one of the travel days down in the south east of the United States, and participants didn't necessarily make their connections. So to have, you know, their own US cell phone where they can call our office in Portland, keep us up to date, they can get advice on what's going on, and that makes that much easier to manage. In fact, in that year, I picked up the last participant who was coming from New Mexico in Dublin Airport at 1 a.m. on Tuesday morning. He'd been delayed nearly 48 hours. Okay, that's a good question. The level of rigor for the study part of these programs, some is great too much as well, too much. What do kids and parents say on the exit interview? They do say the range from, I don't think anyone, it's very clearly set out, you know, the class time, and it's not, these are not lecture-based classes, you know, so class time is 3 hours on a weekday. But generally that might involve our lead, you know, on global entrepreneurship. Emma might be presenting for about 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and then facilitating, you know, group work and group ideas and idea generation, ideation for the remainder of that class time. Because you're working on a project, you're developing an idea, you know, so it's coming from the students in a scaffolded way. But we do get feedback from all sorts, from students who say, look, they would have, they felt the content was a little easier than they expected. You know, I'm a senior and you know, I felt I knew all this. To the opposite end, who say, look, I loved everything about the program, but you know, it's my summer holidays. I really wish I didn't have to go to class. So it is an academic program, but it's a summer program. So I think we've got a great balance between students learning, doing something that they have takeaways from, that they can do something when they leave Ireland that they couldn't do before, but that it's not like an academic semester program that we run, that, you know, grading is vital and credit is hugely important, and you know, fun is removed from the equation. So I really do think we have that balance right. Parents generally, I think, are really happy with the balance, but students give us everything. I will say though that the feedback from our program since I joined in 2019, we offer very detailed end of program surveys, and there's never really been anything flagged in terms of the difficulty, either too much or too little for the course. And our Dublin programs on average score over 9 out of 10 across all the kind of key metrics that we look at. So we're happy that we've developed this to the right level. There is also obviously an element then of us reading a group, and we will tailor, you know, co-curricular activities to that group. So if we feel that, you know, students are really engaged with a topic and they want more from it, we'll make the co-curriculars, because we can adjust them as the program is going on, you know, more linked site visits to the program. Whereas if we feel that a group, you know, is, you know, much more on holiday than they are in class, you know, well, then we may tailor it the other way as well. Thanks, Heather and Malin, for those questions. I'm going to ask and answer my own question as I wait for others to come in, and please, you know, feel free to turn on your mic or just to type into the chat box, because typically a question that we've had a lot when I've hosted these kind of webinars and things previously are the travel logistics and how student gets from being dropped by parents at the airport in some US city to being safe and accounted for in Dublin. So we have a huge team working on travel day, monitoring all the flights that we know students are on, working with students who've missed flights or missed connections, to make sure that me at the center level, that we are informed of exactly when students are arrived, so that we know that we will have people at the airport to meet students, even if they arrive, severely delayed. There will always be someone there to meet your child and to bring them straight to the residence. Okay, so we tend to have one coach for the kind of main group arriving on the chaperone flights, and then depending on how many students are arriving at different hours, mini buses and things like that to bring them to the residence. We then have a system in place that, obviously we tell everybody, as soon as you're here, somebody is worried about you at home, please drop them a line. But we have a system built in that once we have eyes on a person and we verified who they are, that an alert is set up to go to their emergency contacts. More recently, the other topic that we've had a lot of questions about, and probably this is my own experience from 2020, was the implications of the ongoing pandemic for how a program operates and the structures and conditions that we have in place. And, obviously everything could change between now and then, but just as an idea, here in Ireland currently, it's still face masks indoors in retail spaces, restaurants, when you're going to and from your table. Oh, that's a great question, Heather. We don't advise students one way or the other, but I can tell you that in my experience in Dublin, other than where we've had twins or brothers and sisters traveling together, everybody else on the program has come from different high schools. So we haven't had, here in Dublin, we had, 50 students last summer, about 80 students in 2019. And there was no one traveling with their friend or with a group of friends from class. It's an opportunity to, go out and meet new people and follow topics that interest you. I do know that, like, on some of the very large programs that we run in France and Spain, where you can have huge numbers of students, you do often get multiple students from the same high school on those programs. But I view our programs as a way of forming friendships rather than bringing the friendships that you have at home with you. It's a way to broaden your horizons. So I'd always encourage people to strike out on their own. Yeah, I'm leaving my horrible COVID slide up, but just to give the idea that, we still have a lot of, not restrictions, but safety measures in place here in Ireland, despite our very, very high vaccination rate. Despite a very high vaccination rate, we still have a high level of COVID in the country because we have not started vaccinating under 12s, and we have a very young population, but it's not putting pressure on hospitals. This was the case in 2020, and CIE had to cancel programs that were to go to places like Amsterdam. Students moved from their original program in Japan because of entry requirements and things like that. But we were able to operate very safe programs that were still really engaging and a huge amount of fun, despite the restrictions that were in place. And knowing that there might be some in 2022, we anticipate that they will be less than what we've all experienced over the last 2 years. A couple of other questions that were asked previously involve the amount of walking on programs, how far people have to walk. This is Europe. We tend to walk a lot more than people might typically walk in the US. Dublin isn't a walking heavy program. You don't need to have a high level of physical fitness or anything for it. Our classroom spaces are between 10 and 15 minutes walk, depending on stoplights from the residents. I would say on average, students are walking, between 30 minutes and an hour on any given day for different activities. Everything we go to is accessible by public transport. Students have public transport cards. And generally, group is divided based on their own preferences. So usually we find about 60% of students would want to walk to class, and the other 40% go with a program leader by bus. Depending on how far an activity is, if it's Grafton Street at the city centre, the majority of the group will walk. When someone's tired or they have a slight mobility issue, they might take public transport. So I do know from other programs that students complain walking in the heat. Heat is definitely not a problem here anyway. So, a hot summer's day in Ireland is going to hit about 75 to 78 best. Again, if anyone has any questions about the application, things about scholarships or anything like that, I'm happy to share what I know as well. But really, I just want to open up the floor to whatever questions people might have about Ireland, food, the day-to-day, the programs, the teachers, the typical student cohort. I don't know. Yeah, but absolutely. The presentation will be shared out with everyone who registered, whether they're able to join or not. Today, it's a Wistia link, and you can share it with parents, high school children. Absolutely, please do. Yeah, we're looking forward to having everyone in Dublin again in the summer of 2022. High school programs are generally my favorite programs of the year. I love meeting people who are opening their eyes to the world. So it's a great opportunity. We have a great team here in Dublin that have been working on high school programs since I joined and before. So it's myself, Tony, Danielle, and Caitlin are the local team. And then each year we have rotating US program leaders, a couple of whom I believe will be returning in 2022 that were here in 2021. But they tend to be US high school teachers coming in and accompanying those students on the group flights. So we get a balance here with our program leaders between those US program leaders who provide a cultural bridge and a cultural link, and are often more approachable in the early days of a program to students, and then our local program leaders who are the local experts and coordinators and making sure that everything runs on time and everything is on time, and dealing with things that don't run according to plan. That happens on every program occasionally. So I'm just popping an email address into the chat. If it's maybe it is me that's responsible for all those typos. If you're anything like me, you probably have loads of questions. The second that a meeting comes to an end or a webinar is over, or the any questions disappears. And then you think of all those things that you wanted to ask. So the HS Abroad email, which is hsabroad@cie.org, and that's 2 E's. The high school team, the Portland team will answer anything that you send in. If it's very Dublin specific, it'll route its way across to our team here in Dublin for clarification, and then come back, because they know many things, the high school team, but they're not experts in everything with 20 plus sites to manage. So yeah, if there's no further questions, Sophia or Heather, any last minute questions, I'm going to wait online for the next couple of minutes.